Aloha, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Oh, aloha, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for another installment of the Women in Space Exploration Talk Series. We're so excited to have you. My name is Mimi Fuchs. I'll be here to help facilitate today's conversation and help you guys get your questions answered. The purpose of this program is to really introduce you all to some of the amazing women working in space exploration and hope to inspire you a little bit with their stories. If you haven't joined us before, what we're going to do is have a presentation for about a half an hour, and then that'll be followed by a question and answer session. And we want to hear from you. So if you have a question at any point in our presentation, feel free to send it along in the chat window. We do want to encourage young women, young scientists who really have their questions and make sure they get a priority. So if that's you, please add the hashtag WiSE, W-I-S-E, to your question, and we'll put it to the front of the queue. A big mahalo to the Hawaii Science and Technology Museum for helping make this event possible. And a big thank you to our friends at Microsoft who really helped us start off this really wonderful WiSE Talks program. Today, I'm so excited to be able to introduce Jenna Cadwallader. Jenna is a flight technician at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, California. She really is a Jill of all trades, and she studied aviation maintenance at North Valley Occupational Center in California. She did all sorts of kinds of jobs before seizing an opportunity to follow her dream of building robots for space exploration. As of 2017, she was hired at NASA JPL to work on the Perseverance rover as the primary technician for the drill bit that is now drilling holes into the surface of Mars. How exciting. Please give a warm welcome to Jenna. So I'll hand it over to you, Jenna, and let me know if you have any issues with sharing your screen or with your audio.
Got it. Thank you so much. Let me pull up my screen share real quick. Okay. Well, thank you, Mimi, so much for that wonderful introduction. I will go through my presentation real quick, and then we can move on to the Q&A as Mimi stated. Hi, my name is Jenna Cadwallader. I am a propulsion flight technician, as we discussed. When I was 16, I wanted to be a psychologist. I knew nothing about aviation or aerospace, didn't really care, was pretty dead set on psychology. I was enrolled in an AP biology class my junior year, and we had an exam coming up that I hadn't studied for. So there was a flyer at my high school for an aviation career day at the local airport, and I signed up mainly to avoid the exam. In hindsight, that probably wasn't my best move, but I went on that field trip and I stepped foot on that airport and I just fell in love. I said, what can I do to be here for the rest of my life? I spent that event walking around the booths, and I got involved with the public relations department at Van Nuys Airport, which was my local airfield at the time. I worked in the public relations department as an intern for a couple of years until I graduated high school. And they set me up with the aviation maintenance program that was there on the same airfield. When I graduated high school, I enrolled in that trade school. The pictures that you see on your screen are some of the experiences that we got to do during my time at trade school. On the left is changing a tire of a Cessna, which is a small, like 2-person aircraft. And on the right, hopefully this plays, but this is a time lapse of disassembling a jet engine. So this was some of the things that we get to do through this program. Obviously very quick and very short, but it's a good introduction of the hands-on work that you get to do in that type of field. While I was going to school, as Mimi stated, I worked a number of odd jobs. I was a receptionist for a chiropractor's office, an acupuncture and physical therapy office. I worked at an ice rink. I even worked at a build your own frozen dinner place for a while. A little later on into my career, both in school and as a general career, I got a job as a fiberglass technician at Six Flags Magic Mountain, which is an amusement park in Valencia, California. What it meant to be a fiberglass technician is that my department was in charge of inspecting, repairing, and handling roller coaster carts and water slides. So I would start my day between 4 and 5 a.m. walking up and down water slides every day to make sure that they were safe for the guests by the time they arrived. Same thing with the roller coasters. We would go check every single one, make sure they were ready for the general public. On the left here is a picture of us buffing the slides. At the end of the season, you have to prepare the slides to be not in use. You can see the color difference right where I'm sitting of what we had already buffed and what we hadn't buffed yet. We were inspecting some jewelry that we had found in the slide to see if we could identify it with any of the other lost jewelry before we turned it over to Lost and Found. My coworker thought that was very entertaining and took this photo. As I said, our start time was generally very early. So one of the perks that I got while I was doing this job was that I could watch the sunrise from the top of a water slide every day, as you can see on this picture on your right. From Six Flags, I moved over to JPL. My first project through JPL was the Mars 2020 Perseverance Rover. It just passed its 1 year on Mars. As you can see on the picture on the left, that was the rover when she was getting worked on at Kennedy Space Center in Florida. One of the unique things that we do with all of our hardware that's in space is that we build a twin of it. So Perseverance is on the left and her twin Optimism is on the right. This is a test model that we use here on Earth to make sure that all of our operations are successful and we don't have any issues, or we don't get Perseverance in a spot where, she can't get out. Optimism is still here on Earth. She drives around in what is called the Mars Yard, testing and collecting samples and getting everything ready to send to Perseverance. One of the questions that I got asked a lot after Perseverance launched and after I moved on from the Perseverance project was, what are you working on now? Well, from Perseverance, I rolled over to Optimism. So it was really neat to still be involved with the Rover project. Since then, I've moved on to a project that's involved with the International Space Station, but for the majority of my length of time at JPL so far, I was involved with the rovers. These are some of the pictures of what we do as like a day-to-day. So the photo on the left features the suits that we have to wear to make sure that the hardware is protected. Behind us is the heat shield in the back shell that protected the rover during entry into Mars's atmosphere. On the right is myself and my coworker installing the drill onto the robotic arm before the rover went to Kennedy. So this was still at our facility in Pasadena. The suits are interesting and kind of a fascinating part of what we do because they protect the hardware from us just as much as it protects us from the hardware. So this picture on the right is what's considered an ultra clean suit. The drill bits that you see on the left, these are public images that you can find online that were taken on Mars and shared on the JPL site. But this is what the hardware looks on Mars. And the reason we wear the suits on the right is to make sure that we do not contaminate those pictures on the left. This was always the weirdest part of my job to explain to anyone, is to say that we wore these suits because there's a lot of organic and inorganic materials that we have to protect the hardware against. So the rules were a little more strict on us while we were working in this environment. There was, no cologne, no perfume, no makeup, no anything that could contaminate the environment around you, including skin flakes, which is why we're wearing those goggles that you see. That was always kind of the most difficult part to say, this is what I wear to work every day, because getting in and out of those suits could take up to a half hour. But it was one of the most unique things that we got to do, was to be in that ultra clean environment. One of the unique things about being a technician is that I am the hands for the engineers. So they'll bring us something, they'll bring the technicians something and we can assemble it, which means that it's very rare that any 2 days at my job are ever the same. It's a new thing every day. And that's one of the things that I love so much about it. And about aerospace as a whole is, everything's new and exciting. These are some of the pictures of like the range of things that we get to do on a day-to-day basis. On the bottom left is myself laying on the ground, watching the drill, doing a testing campaign to make sure that everything looks good. There was an article on JPL's website about 3 days ago that went over in detail how we do the drill testing. That was really, really interesting if you get the chance to read it. And then the one right above it, we were doing temperature testing on the drill bits that were featured in the picture 2 slides ago, or the slide ago, and you sit there and you monitor this chamber. So we got to do things like play in the snow, which was a little fun. But the vast difference between those two tasks, one of them is in a full clean suit and the other one is laying in the dirt. The one to the right of that is the Gale, which is a sort of telescopic handler, which is basically similar to a forklift. We use it to move rocks around the Mars yard so that we can set them in positions to challenge the rover to do these testing. The one on the bottom right is having the rover going out and doing this testing, and you have to, it's called walking the dog, or affectionately called walking the dog, because you take the power cord out and you are able to kind of help the rover along. So just in these 4 images, there's such a vast array of the things that we get to do in a day-to-day process that isn't really thought of when you think of our jobs. You think of more turning wrenches is something that I hear a lot, but we really get to do all of this. We get to be involved for testing from start to finish on every hardware that's happening. We do test, we do assembly, we do packaging. It's new and it's different every day. Another thing about JPL that I really wanted to point out is that we have such a large crew that, you know, it's never just one person that does something. It's always a combination of people that are involved in the assembly of something. These images here, the one on the left was a portion of the group that made the Perseverance project happen. The picture on the right was our International Women's Day photo. These are both available on the JPL website, but it's so important for me to bring up that this is not, you know, one person can't do it all. There's a career availability for anything that you can think of to do in a facility like this. And this is a perfect example of everybody plays an important part in those big missions. That was all I had, actually. That took a little faster than I was expecting.
That is awesome. Thank you so much, Jenna, for sharing. It is so exciting getting to hear about your work and getting to see some of the pictures in order to have a better idea of kind of the work you do as a technician. I have so many questions, and I know the folks who are joining us also have so many questions. So if you haven't already, please go ahead, submit a question in the question and answer chat, and we will try to get to all of them. Jenna, I feel like there's so many things I want to ask you. It's hard to know exactly where to begin. My first question, and I have a few actually questions about your career path. When you look at the other technicians that you get to work with, do they have a similar career path to you, or do they do something different in order to find themselves working at JPL on rovers or on similar projects?
We have every career path under the sun with the technicians. There are a lot that went through the aviation maintenance route, like myself, but we have motorcycle mechanics, we have auto mechanics, we pretty much have every industry that is mechanically inclined or what would be considered traditionally blue collar. I see a lot. We have electricians, we have construction workers. It's really that base knowledge of assembly and mechanical operations that will lead you here. But we have audio engineers. We have some professional like mountain bike riders. I mean, there's really no one specific path to be a technician.
That is so cool, and also just like very inspiring to know that you can do a variety of different things and still end up working at JPL. I have a couple questions to that point. How did you end up making the jump? Like you talked about how, you know, we were working these different jobs and you were working doing these like fiberglass checks, and then you ended up moving to JPL at 2017. Did you know you wanted to work in space exploration? Was it that you heard about the job from a friend? Did you see it randomly? Like, how were you inspired to make that career adjustment?
I heard about it from a friend. I was working at Six Flags and I got a message that's from one of my friends who had already worked over there that I didn't realize at the time. They said, "Hey, JPL is hiring. I think you would be a good fit for this. Can you send me your resume?" And I said, "What is JPL?" And I had to Google it, which I'm now very embarrassed of. But it was a friend's recommendation to move over from Six Flags. And the composites experience that I gained at Six Flags helped me a lot with that move.
That is so cool. It's very cool to think about this combination of like working at amusement parks and working on aviation and planes and the plane mechanics and how applicable that could be to working in aerospace. Is there anything you miss about the aviation field that you don't get to do now that you're at JPL? And maybe alternatively, are there now things at JPL that you never imagined you'd get to do?
I really miss the runway. As specific as that sounds, I really miss being able to work in the general vicinity of a runway and just getting to listen to the airplanes take off all the time. Because we spend so long in those clean suits with every project that we do, there's this consistent white noise of the airflow to make sure that the room stays clean, which is about the closest I've been able to get to the engine noise. But I do miss that. I miss being able to plane watch at work.
I can imagine, but it seems like there might be some other perks of getting to work at JPL that do make that up. So what would you say is the favorite part of your job right now?
Right now, I think what I emphasized in my presentation is that it's a new thing every day. There's very little repetition. We get to work on something new and exciting all the time. It's, one day you could be cleaning fasteners, the next day you could be installing something onto a hardware component, the next day you could be sitting with your crew on your lunch break watching a rocket launch online. I mean, there's always something new to learn and to experience. It's not repetitive, which I really like.
That is so cool. And I think something that's like very important about jobs and maybe something we don't think of when we're applying to them or even thinking about the idea of what a job looks like. But I think it would be so stimulating to have a job where you get to do all sorts of things and have all sorts of challenges. Okay, we have some more questions coming in. These might be a little all over the place. Do you get to see the driving of the rover on Mars? And I think like from that question, like how can we check on how the Mars rover is doing even when it's so far away on the Martian surface?
I personally do not get to see it. That would be the surface ops team who works in another one of our buildings. But we do have like a tracker on the JPL website. I can post the link in the chat a little bit later, or I can send it to you later. But there is kind of a where is Perseverance now? And it has a little drawing of it going around Mars. It also uploads hundreds of photos from every sol or a Martian day onto that website that you can view from the public site. So you can look at exactly what the rover is seeing, which is one of my favorite things to do. I'll just pull it up on my cell phone on my lunch break. Like, where's Perseverance going today?
That is so cool. Okay, we have so many questions for you. This is so exciting seeing all of them come in. What are some of the challenges you faced in your career prior to getting your job at JPL?
I felt like I was playing some catch up with the mechanical knowledge. I definitely had to learn a lot while I was in school, which is exactly what school is for. But I felt like it was a lot of knowledge in a short amount of time to be able to do like tool identification and fastener identification. And it was a lot of memorization and a lot of acronyms. And I felt like I definitely struggled with that. Obviously, there was also the struggle of, for quite a while, I was the only female at my school. And it definitely put me in a position of wondering if that's what I wanted to do and if that's where I wanted to be, because you can't help ignoring that tiny little voice that wonders if you're out of place. Yeah. That was a huge hurdle for me. And when I got over that, things seemed to go a lot easier. The confidence was there. I felt like the acronyms were easier. The memorization was a lot easier when I felt more like I was where I belonged.
I totally understand that. I spent many years working in telescope operations for the Mauna Kea observatories, and I worked at multiple telescopes, but I remember being part of this community where there's so many people working on the team, but for the folks who are working hands-on, it is a smaller segment of that. And I found myself as one of two women. And it was a situation where I felt very welcome. It felt very great. But you do wonder, am I always going to be one of the only women here? And so I think to that note, it was really cool to see this International Women's photo you shared at JPL, and recognizing that it's not always like that. Maybe it might be that for some portion in school or for certain jobs for certain periods, but there are certainly like a diversity of folks who are participating in this and lots of women who can help, I don't know, like add that extra comfort level. Comfort maybe is not the perfect word, but like add that extra enjoyment to the work environment.
No, you're absolutely right. And that photo was so important to me because my first International Women's Day at JPL ever, they sent out this calendar invite and everybody gathered. And I didn't fully grasp how many women we had across every aspect of careers at JPL. We have engineers, we have technicians, we have outreach specialists.
Yeah.
We have the women in the cafeteria, at the coffee carts, at the store. We have so many different career paths into JPL, and there's such a broad range of individuals that it was so exciting for me on my first one to show up, and that room was packed solid. I mean, it was such like a heartwarming, oh my goodness, there's more.
Absolutely. That is so exciting. I'm really glad you got to experience that, and it's wonderful to work for a place that also appreciates that. Okay, I have some more questions coming in. You showed this really great slide where you showed us 4 pictures and you're like, look how of the range of activities I get to do. I get to be in the mud, moving around in the Mars yard, and I also am in like an ultra clean room getting to do technical hands-on work. But we do have a question that wants someone to ask, can you describe a day in your life as a technician at JPL? So it's hard to pick a certain day. Maybe it's a day like this week or maybe right before launch. Any day in your life as a technician at JPL, we'd love to hear more about.
The stuff that I was working on most recently was I was working in the rock lab facility, which is setting up rocks to be able to do the sampling to make sure that everything works before we send it to Mars, which is directly related to that article that I mentioned. It was one of the drilled replicas that we have was drilling into a bunch of different types of rocks to make sure that there was no issues with it. So in a day in the life would be, we show up at 6 a.m., we get everything set up for the day. And if we're preparing a rock sample, we would go through, we would identify the type of rocks that we want to use. Everything in this industry is documented. It's all paperwork. So you would go find the rock that you wanted to use. You would check the paperwork, make sure it's not on reserve, make sure that nobody has any issues with it.
It's a rock you can use.
Facilities use them, but we have a set of rocks that we can use to do the testing to make sure that nothing would happen with the drill or the rover. So when we're on that stuff, we are able to come and get the rocks set up and deliver them to the different testing facilities throughout the day. And then when they're done testing, we can go through and pick them back up.
Very cool. And do you ever find yourself working on a day where you're not doing hands-on work, or is primarily what you're doing always hands-on? I really loved that you said that you were like the hands of the engineers and you get to really do some of these things that they maybe like conceptualize about.
Depends on your definition of hands-on. So we have some days that are, we'll go in and we'll clean everything and we'll wrap everything with plastic, and it'll be a little less hardware involved. And then we'll have days that are very hardware involved, but your hands are always moving. We don't generally have a job where we would, sit down in front of a computer all day. So you're always doing something with hands, even if it's not directly related to hardware installation.
Very cool. Okay. There's so many good questions that are coming in here. Jenna, great presentation. So inspiring. Do you have any advice about building up self-confidence when working in a challenging, high-performing work environment, i.e. advice about combating imposter syndrome?
Oh, that's a good one. Obviously, everybody is different. The thing that helped me the most was bringing the confidence back in a little bit and coming to the realization that everybody in the environment around you has something to teach you. You do not know everything. And if you take a step back and you listen to what they're saying, watch what they're doing, even if they don't realize that they're teaching you something, there's always something to learn. And I felt like that made me more confident in what I was doing because it made me less hesitant to ask questions. I wasn't going into it as I should know what I'm doing and I'm embarrassed that I don't. It was, okay, this is new. Who can help me with this? How do I better myself for the future? And that helped a lot with getting over that imposter syndrome, was relying on the people around you. You are never a one-person team.
I love that advice. I think it is so important to be open-minded and recognize that we always can learn and we can always become more capable. And often we find ourselves in jobs where maybe you think that you should know everything, but that's not an opportunity to feel bad about it. It's an opportunity to learn more. And it's really wonderful to hear you talk about being able to learn from your colleagues and the folks who you get to work with, maybe closely or maybe less closely. Like, an opportunity, feeling insecure is perhaps an opportunity for us to learn and feel more secure. Thank you for that. Okay.
No growth is ever completely comfortable.
Yes, yes. That also is just like very helpful to remember. Okay, so you talked about how you were interested in psychology, but then you had this opportunity, maybe a little unexpectedly, but to go to your local airfield and get to see some of the work that people who are working as like aviation techs were actually doing. Do you know if there's something similar like that for JPL? Like, are there opportunities for students to visit and observe different folks and what they're working on?
JPL does an open house for the public every year. We haven't had them since COVID, obviously, but they do open house weekends. So you can reserve tickets, they're free, and you can come in and explore the facility. And every building that's open to the public will have a JPL representative who's more than happy to talk about their job and what they do. And another big part of it is events like this, is kind of bringing awareness to those differences in careers through things like this.
Totally. Oh, that's so cool to learn that there are opportunities. So folks, if you happen to be in the Pasadena area, look at JPL's calendar. Maybe you'll be able to come join for one of these events. Who knows what's happening with COVID, but I'm sure it's a public event that you can look for online for the details. Okay, so we have some more questions. You showed us this great photo of folks who got to contribute to the Mars Perseverance rover. Was it entirely completed at JPL? Were there external, like folks in external universities, colleges, research institutions that got to work on it? And in particular, someone wants to know, did anyone from Canada get to work on it?
I'm not entirely sure about Canada's involvement with the Perseverance rover. I know Canada had a very large part in the space shuttle program. They were doing the arms for the shuttles. Perseverance specifically, to my knowledge, did have outside vendors that worked on it, and then the things were delivered to us and integrated with us. So it was kind of cool to see all of those different pieces come together. And as far as university-wise, I do know that there's a lot of universities across the country that are helping us to analyze the data that we're receiving from Mars to make sure that the sample collection goes smoothly. So no, it is absolutely not just JPL. It is a giant collaboration to make something like this happen.
That is also, I think, something really inspiring. There's something, so I remember seeing some of the first images that came back from the rover and feeling how exciting it was, feeling like during the landing of it, how it was like very nerve-wracking, but it was a similar feeling to like watching the Olympics. It's like, I felt such a sense of pride of like what humanity was able to achieve, even though I had nothing to do with it. It was just being incredible getting to watch it and feel like, wow, I get to be alive during this time of this incredible age of space exploration. And it was so exciting. And it's like nice to remember that it's not just one person. It takes a lot of people to have these incredible accomplishments in space exploration. Okay. I have questions about folks who are interested in trying to integrate both science and engineering and technology from the rover into their classroom. So do you have any recommendations on if folks wanted to be able to learn more about like JPL and the rover and being able to learn about it in like a school setting? Are there resources available that they could use that JPL provides or anyone else provides that you know of?
There absolutely are. The public engagement office through JPL on the public website does have a lot of really cool resources. They have a lot of really cool articles that you can read and that you can share. There's also the NASA JPL YouTube channel and Facebook channel that share like videos where they go around and they talk to us about what we're doing and how it works. And it's a really good, like, in-depth look at how we perform in a day-to-day life. But I would highly recommend the YouTube, the Facebook, or the website. They've got a ton of stuff that's really cool to watch.
Awesome. Thank you. And the person who asked that says, thanks for a great webinar. I have another comment. I've worked with Jenna plenty of times. What a great person to work with. So exciting presentation. So Jenna, thank you so much for this. And folks, if you're listening, feel free to put in all of your questions. We still have time to answer them. I do have a question about, like, looking back at your career trajectory, you've gone to take on so many different things. And it was really wonderful to hear that, you expressed interest in psychology and things outside of this kind of hands-on engineering work. What advice would you give for middle schoolers or high school students who are interested in having a similar career to yours? Like, what can they do to prepare, or if they're interested in this and want to learn more?
Absolutely look for extracurricular clubs that would help you with that sort of involvement. I know a lot of schools will offer like a robotics club. I can't recommend those enough. There's such a great path into figuring out what you want to do. If it's the hands-on side, if it's the design side, anything like that. But if you want to work on a project like this, look for those clubs, look for those organizations. There's also a lot of virtual clubs or online clubs that teachers recently have brought to my attention that I didn't even know existed, where they'll do like virtual gatherings and do all these things together from their own homes. There's a program that I work with in St. Louis called Wings of Hope. I love them so much. I can't recommend them enough. But they do a Soar into STEM program every summer. It's like a summer camp type thing for kids in the St. Louis area who can learn about all the different aspects of aviation. I would absolutely look into one of those, see if they have any sort of camp like that in your area, just to see if it's something you're interested in before you dive head first. The beautiful thing about your school years is exploring all those options. You're not dead set on one thing. You can see what interests you, what doesn't interest you. That's the time to learn that.
Totally. School's an opportunity to try new things, see what sticks, see what you like, see what you don't like. I think that's really wonderful. And like really encouraging that we can try new things and discover new things even towards the end of high school, and it can lead to a really exciting, fruitful career. Okay, so JPL is really exciting. JPL has so many different future missions. What other missions are you really excited about at JPL?
We have a lot that are coming down the pipeline right now. It's really exciting. Again, I'm going to reference the JPL website just because it's super helpful. Like I have a really hard time keeping track of everything. And the website is a good resource because you can sort it by future missions and it'll tell you what they are and when they're launching. The one that we are excited for, obviously there's a little bit of a bias because of the Perseverance rover, but I'm very excited for the Mars sample return mission, which is gearing up to bring those samples back from Mars. I'm really excited about that one. Since I left the Mars 2020 project, I've been working on an instrument that's going to the International Space Station in the next couple of months that's also featured on the website. I'm very excited about that one. I mean, everything we do is exciting, obviously, but those ones hold a little place in my heart because of my involvement with the projects.
That's so cool. Are you allowed to tell us a little bit about the work you're doing for the ISS?
I do the instrument that we're working on, in short, is going to be installed on the outside ISS. Monitor minerals in the Earth's atmosphere. I'm not super familiar with the science that goes into it, department, but the write-up that they did on the instrument doing with this thing that we built.
That is so cool. Okay, a couple more questions for you. You mentioned how, you often are working with some of the engineers and you get to be the hands for them and then help them figure out what they need to do or fix or do maintenance for. Do you find yourself only working with engineers, or are there other folks in like different areas or disciplines at JPL, different job titles that you get to work with on a regular basis?
We get to work with a little bit of everyone. So in a standard like assembly procedure, if you're working on something, you'll have your technician, you'll have your engineer who's kind of talking you through and watching everything that's happening. You'll also have your quality assurance engineer who's very closely watching everything that's happening, checking to make sure everything is correct. Throughout an assembly, you will also have contamination control engineers, planetary protection engineers. Before you even get to those stages of assembly, going back to when you're picking everything up and getting
Oh no, Jenna, I'm so sorry. I think at least on my end, the connection is a little bit unstable. So I'm hoping once you hear this, you wouldn't mind just repeating yourself. I'm so sorry to have you do that. Oh, oh no. Well, it looks like we've lost Jenna temporarily. If she's able to come back on in the next minute or so, maybe we can take the time to ask another question. While she's gone, I did want to just reiterate some of those really incredible resources that she passed along to us. So if you're listening in and you're interested in trying to find ways to integrate some of the engineering of the Mars rover, along with some of the science of the Mars rover, into your curriculum, or maybe you want to do a school project for science fair on it, please do not hesitate to go to the JPL website. If you go to their education outreach website, there are some really wonderful resources for educational curriculum related to JPL's missions. In addition, there are wonderful resources just like the JPL YouTube channel and the JPL Facebook page that are able to provide you some really awesome videos, some really awesome images, and just general infographics that also could be very helpful for some of your educational needs. We also talked about how if you happen to live in the JPL general area, there are opportunities to go visit JPL for their open house days. And similar to the way that Jenna was able to have this really wonderful experience of getting to learn about aviation technology from doing an open house at an airfield near her, JPL also has those available. Jenna, I'm so glad you're back. We were just reiterating some of the wonderful resources that you shared with us for the folks who are listening in and joining us on Facebook Live. So I am going to ask one final question to you, Jenna, if you have the time for it. So let me just make sure. Okay, cool. Jenna, I think we've talked about this a little bit, but I do want to hear you say, oh, there we go. What is the favorite part of your job? And do you see yourself continuing to work in this field of technical operations for like space science?
I absolutely see myself staying in this field. I didn't think I would be doing this at this point in my life, but I do really love what I do. My favorite part would be the diversity, as we talked about earlier, something new every day and the being able to work with my hands. I realized in high school that I was not made for sitting behind a desk, and this gives me an opportunity to get past that and to be involved with things that are a little more physically active.
That is awesome. And Jenna, thank you so much for taking the time to be here, give us a wonderful presentation and answer all of our questions. To everyone listening, thank you so much for joining us. Again, my name is Mimi Fuchs. It's really been a pleasure to be with you for this installment of the WiSE talk series. We wouldn't be here without our organizer, Pisces. If you're not familiar with them, Pisces is an aerospace agency under the University of Hawaii at Hilo. We are just so excited to be sponsored by the Hawaii Science and Technology Museum, and a big mahalo to our friends at Microsoft for really helping us launch this program. The fun does not end here. We're going to have more installments of the WiSE talk series, the Women in Space Exploration talk series, in the fall, during fall break. So thank you so much, Jenna. Thank you everyone who's here, and we really hope to be able to see you at the next WiSE talk series. Mahalo and a hui ho. Bye everyone. Oh, and everyone will also have a recording available online. So check the chat channel or go on to pacificsciencecenter.com and you'll be able to find information there. Thanks so much, guys.
Mahalo, Jenna. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'll talk to you guys soon.
Sounds great. Ahui ho.